Hello everyone, welcome to the session. Today we'll be discussing about class Reptilia, which is one of the class which is included under phylum Chordata. Class Reptilia, generally called as the reptiles, are a group of organisms which have invaded the land or terrestrial life, like the arthropods in non-chordata. Arthropods were the group of organisms which invaded all the ecosystems or all the prevailing ecosystems when you come to non-chordata. But when you come to chordates, these or this particular class, Reptilia, they require a special mention in that these are the organisms or these are the group of organisms which have evolved to lead an entirely terrestrial life, or which is the start of leading of the entire terrestrial life when you come to chordates. Because when you compare it with the previous classes like amphibia and pisces are entirely aquatic. Coming to amphibians, they are in the borderline. They spend some of their time in land, but to complete their life cycle they have to go back to water. But an exclusively terrestrial vertebrates or exclusively terrestrial chordate comes under or starts with class chordata, no, sorry, class Reptilia, which is coming under phylum Chordata. The main features of this class are these are cold-blooded animals or poikilothermic, in the sense that you can see a graph here which explains poikilothermy in reptiles. So poikilothermy is usually defined as the temperature, the internal temperature of the organisms, which is more or less like that of the external temperature. But there is a slight difference in that particular definition of poikilothermy. So see this particular graph here, which shows the poikilothermic behavior of a reptile or a lizard here. In this particular red line shows the environmental temperature. You can see it rises as the day breaks, and it reaches the peak at noon, and then slowly shift or slowly declines towards dusk and towards night. So you can see there is a change in the environmental temperature, and this particular brown graph which is depicted here, this represents the internal body temperature of that particular lizard. And comparing the two graphs, you can see that this particular poikilothermy or poikilothermy or the internal body temperature of reptiles is maintained mostly by their behavioral aspects. They show some behavioral adaptation to cope up with the environmental temperature. That means they do not have a temperature which is exactly with that of external environmental temperature. They adjust their internal temperature according to the external temperature, and this adjustment is by various behavioral adaptations. So behavioral adaptations in the sense that, as you can see that during the night time, the temperature is of the particular animal as well as the external body temperature is same as that of the or almost the same. But as day breaks, you can see that the temperature rises, and this increase in temperature also is coped up with the internal temperature of a particular reptile, and this is done usually by the process which is called as basking. So in basking, what reptiles do is they just do something which is called as a sun bath, as we humans do. They do a sun bath whereby the heat of the sun raises their body temperature, and their body temperature rises, and when it reaches a tolerable level, they move on to their shelter places. So that's what their behavioral adaptation to external temperature. That means whenever they require an additional temperature or an additional warmth, they come to the sun or to the heated surfaces, and whenever that goes beyond a tolerable level, they move back. So that is what is happening in the noon. So you can see that these particular animal at noon, when the temperature is very high, what they do is to overcome side effects of the excess heat, what they do is they move into their burrows. So while moving into the burrows, what happens is that in the burrows, the temperature is much less than that of the external temperature. As a result, the body temperature also decreases. So this is how they maintain their body temperature, and that is usually because of many behavioral adaptations whereby they change their locations, they change their exposure to the external environment. When they require more heat, they move around or they move out, and when that goes beyond the tolerable level, they move back to their shelter places. So that is how the poikilothermy, or the cold-bloodedness, or the internal body temperature is maintained in the case of reptiles. And they are completely terrestrial lung breathing, because coming to terrestrial, gills, etc., does not have any function, or they are not present in such animals. They have a completely developed or a completely functional lungs are present, and they do something which is called as lung breathing or pulmonary breathing. They entirely depend upon respiration for pulmonary breathing, or the lungs. They do not have any source of respiratory input or respiratory input other than that of lungs. They are oviparous, being terrestrial. They are oviparous, means they lay eggs, and the speciality of the egg is that being terrestrial, the eggs cannot be same as that of amphibians and fishes, which is usually covered by a jelly-like substance. This require, being terrestrial, these require additional protection to the egg, and hence nature or the organisms have evolved their eggs with a very thick calcareous shell which protect these eggs from desiccation or drying from the terrestrial environment or the heat. And they are tetrapods with their a pair of forelimbs and a pair of hind limbs. And their exoskeleton is being, because of their terrestrial life, it is being variously modified according to their particular mode of habitat. So we'll see one by one. So the commencing sessions, what we have segregated different sections is, we are now moving on with the salient features. So to remember the points of the salient features of these reptilia, we have categorized it as different sections, like the salient features of a particular system, like skeletal system, the salient features of skeletal system, the salient features of the reproductive system, the salient features of the respiratory system, etc. So the salient features will be coming under these heads so that it will be easy to remember. So first we will see the first one, that is the external surface, the modifications or the salient features that are seen in the external surface, which is the skin and the exoskeleton. Coming to the skin and the exoskeleton, they are having a very dry skin, and the skin it is hard and it is cornified with the help of it is covered with, the dry skin is covered with a hard and cornified exoskeleton, and the process of cornification is usually called as keratinization. Their skin is dry in the sense that is because of the absence of skin glands or the cutaneous glands. Cutaneous glands are absent in most of the reptiles. There are exceptions. In some reptiles, there are sen glands are present, which are meant to attract the mates. They do not have any function in maintaining the temperature of the body, etc. So glands are totally absent, and hence their skin is dry. To protect this dry skin, they have evolved this particular external body armor, which is called as the exoskeleton. This exoskeleton, which is present over the dry skin, is advantageous, or it has created an advantageous in the course of their evolution, because of their dry skin and they are terrestrial. What happens is, when animals with the dry skin without any moisture is exposed under the scorching heat of the sun, what happens is the skin dries, or it dries more, and it tends to crack, which does not have a survival value for the organism, because that organism may die very soon. So these organisms which lack a cutaneous glands, they have evolved in such a way that to protect their dry skin, they are having an external armor over the dry skin, that is called as their exoskeleton. And this exoskeleton is variously modified in different groups in this class Reptilia. The modifications you can see in the diagrams which is shown below. It can be either a scute. These are both examples of scute, and this is called as the scale. Scutes are nothing but they are similar to scale, but here the keratinization is somewhat caused by it is not in a continuous manner. In a continuous manner, in the sense that when a scute is formed, it is similar to that of scale and it serves the same function, that is protection. So unlike the scales, which are formed from the epidermis, scutes are formed from the lower vascular layer of the skin, and the epidermal element is only on the top surface. The scutes also produce a horny outer layer that is superficially similar to that of scale. So, in many aspects, they are similar to scales. But the major difference can be seen from the one of the major differences is that scales are completely epidermal in origin. They are the epidermal derivatives, but scutes or plates they are derived from the dermis, which is the layer which is underlying the epidermis. They are derived from this. The dermal and the dermal base of these scales or these scutes also contain bone and are produced into a dermal armor. As it is produced or as they are produced or generated from the dermal layer of the skin, they also have the base of this particular scutes may contain bone, and they are usually produced into a dermal armor. And scutes with such bony bases are properly called as osteoderms. So this is the general structure of what is called as a scute, and the main difference between the main difference is that there is a bony component, a bone component in scute, but in scale it is lacking. Another thing is that is because of one is the scute or the plate, they are derived from the dermis, the other one is from the epidermis, and hence there is no bone or a bony layer or a bone-like structure in the case of scales. Another thing is you can see that in the case of scales, it is continuous. One behind the other, it is continuous. And when you compare it with the scutes, you can see that it is discontinuous. Discontinuous in the sense that after a scute, you can see a space which will be the normal dry skin of the particular animal. So this is not a continuous layer, it is interrupted at certain locations where the naked skin is exposed. So that is a major difference between a scale and a scute. So scales are usually seen in the case of the snakes, well developed in the case of snakes, and also seen in lizards, etc. Plates are usually seen, as you can see in the diagram, in crocodiles, in other our tortoises, turtles, etc. Their shell is also called as their shell is also the scutes or the plates. It cannot be considered as scales. So among terrestrial vertebrates, this particular structure, the scales or the scutes, they appear first in a reptile. Such structures are first seen in reptiles. From here you can see in birds, in mammals, etc. You can see such structures, or the skin derivatives can be seen. So before this, in our amphibians, etc., such structures called as scales are not seen, or they are not developed. They take their first appearance in chordates in the case with, or they can be seen in chordates in reptiles. So this is with their skin. So first we have discussed their salient features of the skin, and next we are moving on to the skeletal system. So skeletal system, the major element is the temporal fossae and arcades, as you see here. So temporal fossae are nothing but they are cavities which is present inside the skull in the temporal region. So this side region is usually called as the temporal region, and you can see two cavities. The smaller one which is on top is called as a supratemporal fossae, as you can see here, and the lower one is called as the infratemporal fossae. So these fossae are present, or they are the salient feature of the skull of reptiles, and it is based on the presence and position of this foci. We are going to classify reptiles into different subclasses that we'll see later. So coming to this foci, you can see different foci depending upon the different classes. It can be, you can either see both the foci, that is supratemporal as well as infratemporal, in some cases only infratemporal, in some cases only supratemporal, etc. So such foci are present in the case, or foci are a salient feature in the skull of reptiles. And the next term is arcades. Arcades are nothing but they are skull bones which are surrounding this foci. The bones which surround these cavities, which are the bones of the skull, they are called as arcades. So these foci and arcades are another important feature of this reptile, or these particular class, which is called as the reptiles. And the significance of the presence of such a cavity inside the skull is that because skull is a particular structure which is meant to protect the important part of the body, which is called as a brain, and providing the skull a protective layer with cavities which is of no use might be harmful to the animal. Because of this reason, this foci which are present in the reptilian skull will have an uh, important or will have an important or will be important in the sense that they will have some role to play in their life, or some role to play in their evolutionary process. So the presence of this foci in the skull is that these foci are the sites where the muscles from the jaw, or the muscles which are arising from the jaw is inserted into this foci. And the significance, or the main feature of inserting such muscles into the skull is that when they catch their prey, mostly these reptiles, they do not use their limbs for catching their prey. It is mainly meant for locomotion, and in some reptiles like snakes, they lack this particular structure which is called as a limbs. And hence catching their prey without such limbs in a terrestrial mode of life might lead to some difficulty in catching the prey. And this particular modification, or this particular feature, have evolved in such a way that these muscles will help to close and open their jaws tightly. As a result, when a prey is being caught in their mouth, they can close their mouth or jaws in such a force that the prey will not be gripped out from their mouth. So it is said that in the case of that can be prominently seen in the case of crocodiles and snakes, because that is the only way they catch their prey, they grip their prey, etc. Because it is said that even though the hardest bone in a human body can be broken by a single bite from a crocodile. Single bite in the sense a single shut of their mouth can break such bones. That means it is with such force they close their jaws when they are confronting with a prey. So that is why, or that is the importance, or that is the function of this foci in their skull. That is the place where the powerful jaw muscles are being attached, and these jaw muscles help to grip their prey so tightly so that they can have their bout. So next important feature of the skeletal system is the presence of something which is called as an occipital condyle. So occipital condyle is nothing but, as you can see in the diagram, so this is a projection of the skull, or projection from the skull, and this projection, or this convexity from the skull sorry, this particular projection from the skull is meant to articulate with the vertebral column. So as in the case of humans, we know that the skull is continuous with the vertebral column. And our vertebral column is made up of many pieces of bones, which you call it as each vertebra. So each vertebra is not fused together to form a single vertebral column. They are just articulated. Articulated in the sense that they are not fused or cemented to form a single structure. They are just held one on top of the other, like our building blocks which children used to play. There is no cementing between the blocks which is used by children. Uh, that is, one block is just held on top of the other. It is because of the structure. One will have a cavity and the other will have bumps on the other one. As a result, one will be held on to the top of the other. And such joining of two structures is usually called as articulation. There is no fusion. They are just held on top of the other because of their structural peculiarities. That is like a key fitting onto a lock. One will have a convexity, the other will have a concavity. So the same happens with our skull and the vertebral column. So every vertebra in the vertebral column is articulated, and the skull and the first vertebra is also articulated in the same manner. So articulation in the sense that if I draw, consider this as a skull at the posterior end. So from here, the vertebral column or the bones of the vertebral column starts. So the first vertebra has to be articulated with the skull. And this articulation, how it causes is that so if I take this as the skull, and here from here you have the first vertebra. So I'm drawing the first vertebra here. So the first vertebra will have a concavity in it like this. Okay, so consider this as the first vertebra. So consider this as a bone, and this is having a concavity. And what the skull has is, the skull will have a convexity like this. Okay, or a bump like this at the posterior end where it will be articulating with the vertebral column. So there will be a convexity on the skull. In every case, it is the same. The skull will have a convexity and the first vertebra will have a concavity, so that the convex portion or the bulged portion will fit into the concavity or the hole which is present on the first vertebra. And such a projection on the skull is called as occipital condyle. So every skull is having an occipital condyle, that is a projection at the posterior side or behind the skull, where the skull is going to articulate with the vertebral column or the first vertebra. The skull and the first vertebra is connected with the help of this occipital condyle. So occipital condyle is seen in the skull. It is a projection in the skull through which it is articulating with the first vertebra. So the projection means it is a convexity, and you can see a corresponding concavity on the first vertebra. As a result, they fit like the building blocks. And this particular occipital condyle, if it is single, as I drew here, if there is only a single projection like this, so this is a reptilian skull which is shown here, crocodilian skull, which is having only a single projection. Such an occipital condyle is called as a single occipital condyle, and such a skull is called as a monocondylic skull. Now this diagram is that of a human. In the case of human, we are having two such condyles. That means it is a bicondylic skull. So if you have a single occipital condyle, it is called as monocondylic skull. If it is two, as in the case of humans, it is called as bicondylic. In the case of reptiles, it is monocondylic in the sense that they are having a single projection in the skull which fits into a single cavity in the, or a single cavity which is present in the first vertebra. So a convexity on the skull, which is called as occipital condyle, will fit into the concavity of the first vertebra, and that convexity is called as, or the projection in the skull is called as, the occipital condyle, which is a structure which is used to articulate with the first vertebra. So these are the definitions of the term occipital condyle and a single occipital condyle, which is seen in the case of reptiles. And if it is single, it is called as monocondyle. Like if the projection is single, as this case, it is monocondylic. And in the case of humans, you can see this greenish blue color, that is the bicondylic skull. That means there are two projections. There are two projections in the skull. As a result, there will be two concavities in the first vertebra of humans to fit into it. So this is about the skeletal system, their skull. So two things to be taken into account of here is the presence of fossae and the presence or the occipital condyle, which is a single occipital condyle. So moving on to the next feature of the skeletal system is ribs with a sternum. So ribs appear first in the animal kingdom in reptiles. So that is also an adaptation due to their highly efficient lungs and heart. In the case of frogs, the lungs were having only a minimum amount, or they have a minimum use of the lungs, which is not such a muscular organ. It is just a membranous organ. But when you come to reptiles, it is a muscular organ, as you see in the case of humans, because they depend solely for their respiratory purpose in the lungs. As a result, it is a very important organ and it should be protected. And that protection of the lungs is provided by the cage, which is called as the ribs. So ribs arise from the vertebral column and they fuse in the ventral side. So on your back, if you consider the humans, we'll take an example of human to explain this, and we'll come to reptiles. So if you take your back, which is the dorsal side, where you have the vertebral column or the vertebra, from there the ribs arises and they fuse in the ventral side. So if you press on to your chest region, you can see a particular flat portion, and that is that flat portion in your chest region. In the middle, you can see a very hard structure in the chest region, and that hard plate is called as the sternum. It is the region where all the ribs fuse. So ribs which are arising from the vertebral column, they form a basket or a covering surrounding the lungs and heart, the major organs, and they fuse on the ventral side in the center of your chest region or center of the thoracic cavity, and that center hard piece is called as the sternum. So this hard piece is called as a sternum. If you see or check the diagram here, you can see here this particular piece is called as a sternum. So the central one. So ribs arises from the vertebral column and they form a basket, and they are joining the central piece, which is called as the sternum. All the ribs, they fuse to this central piece, which is called as the sternum. So ribs with a sternum makes its first appearance in the case with reptiles. And every reptiles do not have this particular particular sternum, because according to their adaptations, there are exceptions, and the two exceptions are our chelonia, which includes the turtles and the tortoises. So you can see in this diagram, they do not have a sternum because their ribs are fused with their shell. All the ribs are fused with their shell, so they do not form a basket. All the ribs are fused onto the carapace, on the upper part of their shell. As a result, they do not have a carapace, and you can see the case with the snakes also, because they do not have any other locomotory organ. They require a swift movement. So imagine a snake with a sternum from their you can see the ribs from the head to the tail. So imagine a sternum from head to tail. It will be like a stick. It cannot exhibit their particular type of movement. So so they have adapted, or because of their particular adaptation or evolutionary their evolutionary advantages, this particular organisms, both the chelones or tortoises, turtles and snakes, they do not have a sternum. They have ribs, but they lack a sternum. In all other cases, the lizards, the crocodiles, etc., they have a sternum that you can see here. In this particular diagram, this is the diagram of an alligator, a smaller one, a smaller alligator. You can see the sternum in this particular one. This particular piece is a sternum. Here also you can see this is a sternum, and you can see the ribs. So the major function of the rib is to protect the two major organs which are present in the thoracic cavity, which is the heart and the lungs. It forms a basket. It protects those very important organs which made organisms to survive on land. So that is ribs with the sternum. So ribs and sternum makes their first appearance in the animal kingdom in reptiles, and there are some exceptions in reptiles too. So coming to the next feature of the vertebral column or the skeletal system, their vertebrae, most of their vertebrae is procoelous. So this is a new term, and this is a term which is used to define a vertebra. Procoelous vertebra. So procoelous in the sense that we saw that in the skull there is a convexity, and there will be a concavity corresponding in the corresponding portion of the first vertebra. So if I take the first vertebra, so in every vertebra is having certain structural feature. So if you take a vertebra, you can see a drum-like portion, and this drum in every vertebra, from amphibians to the highest mammals, you can see almost the same features can be seen with some modifications according to their class. There are certain modifications. So there are certain common features too, and we'll discuss the common features now. So in every vertebra, there will be a drum-like portion, and that drum-like portion is called as a centrum. And onto the centrum, you can see an arch which is connected. That arch is nothing but it is through this arch the spinal cord moves. From the brain, the spinal cord moves through this arch. That means a drum is there. Onto the drum, you have a C-like bone which is attached, which forms an arch. That arch, because of their arch structure, it is called as a neural arch. So that means if I draw this in a cross section like this, if I cut this and if I draw, it will be a drum-like piece like this, and the C-like structure will be like this if I am cutting it and drawing like this. So it is through this C-like structure, so every vertebra will have such a structure, and it is through this neural arch the spinal cord moves. So we are now concentrating only onto this centrum. There are other structures too. We'll discuss that when we discuss the entire structure of the vertebral column in amphibians. So now we are moving or looking only to the centrum to define this term which is called as procoelous. So if a centrum, so this is the central drum-like structure. In this drum-like structure, if and I taking this anterior and posterior. Anterior means it is a side, or you can see that if the animal in an animal, the anterior means it is where the head is positioned. So the anterior of the centrum means it is the side of the vertebra of the centrum which is facing the head, and the other one which is facing the tail. So that is anterior and posterior. So if you are having an anterior concavity and posterior convexity, so I will draw it more precisely. So if the centrum is having an anterior convexity, you have a centrum like this, and a posterior concavity. Okay, on the anterior side it is, sorry, I drew it wrong. So in the anterior side you are having a concavity, and on the posterior side you are having a convexity. So this is the anterior and this is the posterior. So I said that these vertebrae, they are going to articulate with, if it is the first one, it will articulate with the first one and the skull and the second vertebra. The second will be articulating with the first and the third. That is how it is, all our vertebrae is being placed. So this is with the help of such structures. That means if I take the skull, which was monocondylic, so if take this as the first vertebra. So first vertebra is having a concavity so that it will fix the convexity of the occipital condyle, if this is the first vertebra. And coming to the second vertebra will be the same like the first one. So if I'm marking it as the second one, and this is the take this as the first vertebra. If this is the first vertebra, we said the posterior portion was having a convexity so that it will fit onto the anterior concavity of the second vertebra. So that is how the vertebra and the skull are they are articulated to form that particular structure. And such a vertebra where the centrum or the structure of the centrum, where the centrum is having an anterior concavity and posterior convexity, such a vertebra will be called as a procoelous vertebra. We have other types like amphicoelous vertebra, and there are many other types. We'll discuss it later. But in vertebrates, most of their vertebra are procoelous. Procoelous meaning it is the definition given to a particular vertebra depending on the structure of the centrum, how the centrum is. If the centrum is having an anterior concavity and posterior convexity, such a vertebra will be called as a procoelous vertebra. So this particular definitions like procoelous, amphicoelous, etc., they are given based on the structure of the centrum, which is a portion or the major portion of the vertebra. In every vertebrates you are having, from amphibians you can see, in fishes you do not observe such a thing. From amphibians you can see in the vertebra this particular structure called as a centrum with additional neural arch, neural spines, etc. But depending upon the centrum we name the vertebra. Vertebrae are named depending upon the structure of the centrum. Structure in the sense how many cavities are present in the anterior end, whether it is a cavity, whether it is a convexity, or whether it is flat, etc. So depending upon the structure of the centrum you are going to name it. In the case of reptiles we are having only procoelous, meaning most of their vertebra is having an anterior concavity and posterior convexity. So such vertebra will be defined as a procoelous vertebra. So this much with the skeletal system. And now we are moving on to the respiratory system. As we said, lungs are the major respiratory organs, and hence it is called as pulmonary respiration. Heart is incompletely four-chambered, as you can see in the diagram. So amphibians, they are having only a three-chambered heart where the auricles are separated with a septum here, but ventricles are single. You can see birds and mammals which are having a four-chambered heart. This is chamber 1, chamber 2, 2 auricles, chamber 3, chamber 4, where you can see the ventricles are also completely separated in both mammals and birds. But when you come to reptiles, you can see that the auricles are completely separated. As a result, you have two chambers. Incompletely four in the sense that you can see this particular septum is not complete. There is a small gap. Septum means it is a particular structure which partitions two cavities. That is called as a septum. And here the septum is incomplete. As a result, you are having an incompletely four-chambered heart, but there is an exception which is crocodile. They are having a completely four-chambered heart. Then their RBCs are oval and nucleated. So if you take with that of, compare it with that of humans, we are having an non-nucleated RBC which is biconcave, but here it is oval and nucleated. Another important thing with this is the Jacobs presence of an organ which is called as a Jacobson's organ, which is present on the roof of the buccal cavity, roof of the mouth or the cavity. And this is an organ which is usually meant for sensing smell. Smell in the sense that usually it is mainly concerned with sensing pheromones. pheromone sensing, in the case of snakes, temperature sensing, etc. So mainly the surrounding or the sensational or olfactory responses are taken in by Jacobson's organ, because it is innervated by some nerves which reaches the brain, and it is usually present in the roof of the buccal cavity. So that's with the circulatory and the respiratory system. Coming to the excretory system, the excretory system, the kidneys are metanephric kidney. So this might be a new term, metanephric kidney. So metanephric is nothing but the embryonic kidney can be divided, or it forms from three different, or you can take the embryonic kidney, the origin of embryonic kidney, in three portions of the embryo. That means if I take an embryonic if I take this as an embryonic kidney, it's not a kidney, embryonic structure which is going to form the kidney in the embryo. Such a structure or such a group of cells, it is not a structure, such a group of cells which is going to form the so-called kidney in the embryo. Such a structure or a group of cell, it can be divided into three depending upon their position in the body. Okay, and the most anterior group of kidney forming cells in the embryo, they are called as pronephros. So the anterior one, pronephros, the middle one is called as mesonephros, and the most posterior group is called as metanephros. That is what you see here. Okay, this is the anterior one which is called as pronephros. So pronephros means that is seen in the lower chordates. That means only the anterior portion develops into the functional kidney. Functional kidney develops in lower vertebrates only from the anterior region of the cells. The other cells, they degenerate. They do not form an adult kidney. The other cells, they degenerate. Only the pro part or the anterior part forms a kidney. That is seen in lower forms. Coming to the next one, the middle portion, which is the mesonephros, as you can see here. So mesonephros is a middle portion that is formed in amphibians, etc. In such cases, the pronephros and the metanephros group of cells, they disintegrate. They do not form a adult functional kidney. Only the middle portion, they form a functional kidney. Coming to metanephros, that is the one which you see in reptiles. Metanephros or metanephric kidney is the type of kidney which you see in the adult, which is formed from the group of cells which was seen in the posterior end, like here. So this is a posterior most portion. These particular group of cells, they form an functional adult kidney from the posterior group of cell, and that is called as a and if kidney is formed from that posterior group of cell of the embryonic kidney, that is called as metanephric kidney. In a metanephric kidney, what happens is, you can see when a metanephric kidney is formed, some of the mesonephric cells are also present. These mesonephric cells, what they do is, they become part of the male reproductive structures. That means in females they degenerate, that is a mesonephric part. In a metanephric organism, metanephric kidney having organism, the mesonephric tubules, they are retained only in males, and they form the male reproductive ducts like the epididymis, etc. They are formed from this particular mesonephric duct only in males. In females, it will degenerate like the pronephros. So what happens in mesonephros, as we said, the pronephros part will degenerate. This also will degenerate. As a result, only the middle part will form a functional kidney in the adult. In metanephric, the pro completely degenerate. Most of the mesonephric cells degenerate, but some will be retained and they form the tubules of the male reproductive tract. But a functional excretory system or a kidney is formed from the metanephric cells, which is present in the posterior part of the kidney. So that is with metanephric kidney. Their excretory product is uric acid, and hence it is called as, and hence these organisms are called as uricotelic organisms. Coming to their reproductive system and development, males usually have a double or single copulatory organ, like the copulatory organ, which is called as the copulatory organ in reptiles is usually called as a hemipenis. This hemipenis may be paired in some cases. In some snakes, some lizards, etc., they are seen in pairs. There might be two. That is why it is called as double copulatory organ. In some cases, normally it will be single. Their fertilization, that means the sperms are deposited inside the body of the females. They do not have an external fertilization as you saw in invertebrates, etc. In amphibians also, in frogs also, you are having external fertilization. But when you come to reptiles and you move on to birds and mammals, you have only internal fertilization. There is no external fertilization. Then eggs are laid on land and usually protected with the shell, which we have discussed earlier. And because the embryo has to grow in a protected shell, it has to have the reserve food inside. The reserve food is yolk. And there are some terminologies which is related to the egg, that is macrolithial. The eggs are defined as macrolithial, means it is heavily filled with yolk because the embryo is going to develop in a closed chamber. So all food required for this development should be provided earlier, and that is yolk, and it will be heavily yolked, as you see in the case with bird egg example, the hen, etc. That is heavily filled with yolk, and that such eggs are usually called as macrolithial. That is depending upon the amount of yolk. The same egg of reptiles is also defined by another term called as cleidoid egg because of the presence of the shell. The same egg is also called as an amniote egg because of the presence of a covering in the embryo, which is called as the amnion. The embryo, when it develops, it will be covered by a covering which is called as amnion, and hence it is called as the amniotic egg. So there are three terminologies which define a reptilian egg, which is usually asked as 1 mark questions. Macrolithial because it is heavily filled with yolk, cleidoid because it is having a shell, amniote egg because it is having the embryo is having a covering or an extra embryonic layer which is called as amnion. So these are the salient features. This much about the salient features. So coming to the salient features, to take a quick recap, we have discussed the salient features with the external surface, the skin, exoskeleton, the skeletal system, skull. Then in the skull itself, we saw the fossae and the condyles, the ribs, the sternum, the vertebrae, and we came to the circulatory, the heart, the speciality of the heart, the speciality of the lungs, etc. Then we saw the respiratory system, where we saw what is a metanephric kidney. After that, we saw what is the reproductive and development, reproductive system, their specialities, and also the development, etc. So that's with the salient features. The next is classification of reptiles, which is based on the number and position of the temporal fossae. That will be discussed in the next session.